Hey everybody, welcome back. This video feels a little like a deja vu moment. I feel like I just shot a Klipsch video. Today I'm shooting another one, and that's because you guys just keep sending me Klipsch models for me to work on. Klipsch, I know you're out there, I know you watch all my videos. Maybe you guys should just send me the rest of your product line that I haven't looked at yet, and it would save our customers the time and the trouble of sending each one to me and doing them one at a time. Let me just get these things all done, finished, and get everybody helped, and that will make everybody happy. Okay, this one, the RP-5000F, and the 5000 model, to me is one of the cherries of the whole model, of the whole line. That's because this particular size tweeter has the best response. When you get into the bigger baffles and the bigger drivers, and the waveguide for the tweeter starts getting bigger and bigger, the response is just not as good. You should have just stuck with this one for all the models because it takes less parts and has a smoother response. Unfortunately, this is one of the older models where the drivers are not in phase. And I know I've beat on Klipsch quite a bit about drivers not being in phase, and they've gone through and redesigned the product line, and they've addressed that issue. On the newer models, the drivers on tweeter axis are now more in phase. And this is one of the older models. This is not the V2. So for all you guys who have these, you're better off upgrading these than stepping up to the newer model, because not only are we going to fix the out of phase issue with the drivers, but you're going to get a whole lot better parts quality and new connectors, new wiring, sheets of no res to put down this box that's going to do away with cabinet resonances. We're addressing a lot of issues, not just the frequency response. But let's throw some measurements up here, and let's look at the on-axis response, and let's look at the one that we took showing individual drivers, where we show the woofers and then the tweeter. And if you look at that response, you can see the tweeter and the woofers roll into each other really well. It's like really smooth. There's no big response anomalies there. There's no peaks. There's no ringing. It's just right. However, as you can see, they don't sum. They're not in phase. And it makes a hole in the response. Now, looking at the vertical off-axis, we always look at vertical off-axis because it tells us if we move up or down, are we getting back more towards the drivers being in phase or getting even further away. So let's look at the vertical off-axis going up. That means we're on the tweeter axis and we're going up. And as you can see, the response gets a lot worse. So instead of them being 80 degrees out of phase and not summing, now they're moving more toward 180 degree out of phase, and there's just a huge hole. So if you're listening to these things and you stand up and then you sit down, you'll notice all the highs completely fall out of them when you sit down. Now let's look at the vertical off-axis going down. That's the same 4-inch measurement going down, or 4 inches at a time going down per measurement. And as you can see, the red line is where it's on tweeter axis. And as you go further down the line there, the drivers actually start becoming in phase, which means they're more perfectly in phase at this angle. So if you're at the listening position and you lay down and put your head on the floor, you may be in a situation where the drivers are in phase and not have that big hole in the response. Unfortunately, most people don't listen with their head on the floor. So I don't recommend that as a solution, and it still keeps all the cheesy parts in the signal path. Let's look at the horizontal off-axis, and you can see the horizontal off-axis drops off pretty cleanly. That means as you move left or right, the tweeter's response drops off real smoothly. There's no peaks in the response, nothing. It's other than the big hole that's already there. We can't do anything about that the way it is from the factory. That's the way it measures. And then lastly, let's look at the grill, the measurement with the grill on it. And as you can see, there's a little bit of issue there with the grill, but not bad. And I like these grills. They're held on magnetically, and the way they're made It's pretty thin, and the front edges on the inside here are rounded, which minimizes diffraction. So when you stick that thing on there, it really doesn't wreck the response. There's a little bit of a change there, but it's not wrecked. So they're nice grills. They're nicely made. Let's look also at the impedance curve. The impedance does drop to 4.8 ohms, and there is an impedance mismatch. There's an imbalance there. Down on the tweeter end, the impedance shoots up pretty high. It's up around 10 ohms. We're down at the woofer end. It's at 4.8 ohms. So different amplifiers are going to see those loads differently and may drive more or less power depending on the impedance. So that's always a problem as well. So Hobbs worked on this one, and he took all the measurements on it, and it sat there for a few days before I could get to it, and he jumped on it and used the RP-5000 as kind of a baseline. He knew what we did to that one, looked at the schematic for that one, and used that as kind of a baseline to go from. Let's look at what he got. Let's look at the on-axis frequency response now. As you can see, it's pretty flat. It looks great. And if we look at the crossover response, you can see that we did put a different filter on each woofer. They're not playing together. Only the top woofer is playing all the way to the tweeter. The lower woofer is not playing as high, and that gets the acoustic centers moved up to where they're closer together and not this far apart. So that improves the vertical off-axis response as well. Speaking of vertical off-axis response, let's look at it. Here's the new vertical off-axis response going up. And just for fun, let's look at the old frequency response vertical off-axis going up and the new vertical off-axis going up. And as you can see, it's a big difference. You can stand up now and the frequency response doesn't change. Also, if you look at the frequency response going down, you'll see that now going down, it starts to change a little bit. So what we've got going on here is we've changed the order of the filter, and we've moved the acoustic centers, and so now they're in phase over a wide area. So think of it as the speaker's in phase really well over the listening area instead of it's in phase down at the ground. Now it's in phase more up. And as you move up out of it or down below it, it starts to rotate in a way that it's becoming a little bit out of phase. But overall, through that whole range, it stays in phase very well. And so like you see on these graphs here, you have to move pretty far for it to make a change. Now let's look at the horizontal off-axis. Again, this tweeter has great off-axis response in the horizontal plane. It just smoothly drops off. So it would have a very balanced room response after this upgrade. And then let's look at the new spectral decay, which is super clean. I rarely get speakers in here that have a spectral decay that's this clean. Granted, these woofers do have a bunch of resonance and a bunch of breakup, but it's much higher in frequency, and the crossover is pulling it down out of it before it can really get to that range. If you'll notice in the spectral decay, there's just a tiny little bit of a ring there, right around, just below 2,000 hertz, right at 2,000 hertz, just barely, not much. I'd say that's great. It looks clean all the way across, no problems there at all. The impedance still drops down into the 4 ohm range, but it's more balanced on both ends now. So a nice even load for the amplifier. So everything overall is much more balanced now, and the frequency response is great. With the parts quality upgrade, it's going to be a huge improvement in clarity, detail levels. A lot of those spatial cues that were getting just completely damped out are going to be there now without the tweeter being too bright. So that means imaging and soundstage layering and things like that are going to be greatly improved over what they were. Also, we're throwing in 2 sheets of no-res with this thing to do away with some of this cabinet resonances, which is really going to help. It's going to tighten up that bass response, clean up the vocal region quite a bit. You're going to get a set of tube connectors to replace those cheesy bonding posts that have steel parts in them, and all new wiring. So all of that, and a sonic cap for the tweeter circuit. So Not only good parts, great parts. $539 for everything. So for $539, you get the kit, you get the schematic, you get our help, and everything you need. And a fun project. You can go in and upgrade these things and turn them into a pretty nice little speaker. So that's it on this one, the RP-5000F. We have fixed it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. If you haven't, please do. We'll see you guys in the next video.